Welcome to How to Start a Business. Today, we are going to be talking to two of the expertest experts you're ever going to meet when it comes to law and accounting. Two things that I think strike fear into many entrepreneurs' hearts. How do you know that you're starting a business the right way, that you're saving yourself a lot of time, expense, and headache down the road? These are the two experts who are going to help you do that. And we're going to have a very robust question and answer session. So first things first, we want to thank Global Entrepreneurship Week, the organizers. We are here on this amazing platform during this amazing week. We are very fortunate to be here with you today, and it is all due to GEWKC and Casey SourceLink and the folks who do amazing work to put this event together. So first things first, we're going to do a little housekeeping, and I want to explain something to you. So my name's Lauren Conaway. I'm going to be your moderator for today, but I also have the happy duty of managing Q&A. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you should see buttons that say both chat and Q&A. We want this to be a really, really interactive, engaging session. And so I'm going to ask you all, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them through the Q&A box, not the chat box. We encourage you and we invite you to chat amongst yourselves and share your insights. And we want you to be engaged throughout the whole thing. But when it comes to question and answer, it makes it a lot easier for me to manage the whole process and make sure that I am getting all of your questions or as many of your questions answered as we possibly can. And I promise you that I am going to do that, but help me out just a little bit by putting your questions through the Q&A button. Pretty easy. So I did want to mention that. Let's see here. We're going to have a couple of polls, or actually we're going to have 3 polls that we're going to be posting throughout the event. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear where you're at in your business, and we want to make sure that we are answering questions and asking questions in a way that is most helpful to you. So when we deploy a poll, it should be fairly easy. Just click and your answer will be recorded. We will announce it at a later time at some point over the course of the event. So just help us out. We would love to see what you have to say. So first poll that we are going to deploy, we're going to ask a very, very, I think, base question, but it's, how would you classify your business? If you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and share your answers. Go ahead and clickety-click, and we will continue on. I'll read those responses to you a little bit later. But right now, it is my very, very, very happy duty, I guess, to introduce Chris Brown. And Chris is with Pixel Law. I'm going to let him introduce himself. He's going to do it much better than I ever could, but I've known Chris for a really long time. He is a formidable legal brain packaged into a really nice guy, and he is just here to help. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks so much, Lauren, for joining us, and of course, Megan as well. Like Lauren said, my name is Chris Brown. I'm an attorney. I've been doing legal work for the last 11 years or so. I went to UMKC Law School, worked for a firm for a while in Kansas City, and then started my own firm. Used to be called Venture Legal, and then recently, earlier this year, I rebranded to Pixel Law for a bunch of different reasons. So I help freelancers, startups, and small businesses with day-to-day legal needs, and it's just really what I love doing. Working with small companies is just way more fun, in my opinion, than working with the big people. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk through about 5 or 6 different things about starting a business that you should do to do it the right way, like Lauren was saying, or if you haven't done it the right way, you could most likely go back and clean it up. For the most part, any mistakes you made can probably be fixed. So the first question always comes up, like, do you actually need a business entity, like an LLC or a corporation? And the answer is no, you don't. You don't have to have a business entity. If you want to just sell artwork on Etsy, you can do it under your own name. You can say, my name's Chris, here's my artwork, give me some money, I give you the art, and call it good. The thing is, there's a lot of advantages to having an LLC or a corporation. There's far more advantages than there are disadvantages. So you can avoid having accidental partnerships with people. You can more easily split equity ownership of your business if you have an LLC. It's easier to sell. Sometimes it's easier to win clients. Sometimes it's better for taxes. So all these different reasons. One of the most important legal reasons is that it creates limited liability for you as an individual, right? I mean, that's the name of an LLC, right? A limited liability company. And you get the same limited liability with a corporation. What that means is that your business will be liable for its debts and obligations, but you personally will not be liable, right? So if I say I'm selling artwork through Etsy and I've got some people that are selling artwork with me and it's all through my business and one of them commits copyright infringement, well, my business is probably liable. And that person that also made the infringing work is probably liable. But I, Chris Brown, am not personally liable for that liability, right? The LLC will shield me from that personal liability. There is one caveat there, which is you're always going to be personally liable for things you do wrong. So an easy example is if you own a pizza restaurant and you're the person delivering the pizzas out on the road and you cause a car accident, you can't say that my LLC was behind the wheel, right? It was you. You were the person driving that car. You're still liable for that. So then you have to figure out, what kind of business entity should you form? You can form an LLC. That's most common. And for most of you, that's probably what you want to do. Or you might form a corporation. The only real reason today to form a corporation is if you have some kind of an ownership structure that's complicated, or if you're more relevant, if you're raising venture capital from professional investors. Aside from those situations, you probably don't need to be a corporation. And you can also create an LLC and then convert to a corporation later if it's discovered that you need to be one for whatever reason. I've done that several times. You may have heard of S Corps, but the thing to remember about S Corps is that that's a tax election, not a business type. So if you make an S Corp election, you'll still be an LLC or a corporation. They'll just be taxed as an S Corp. And I'm sure Megan can go much deeper on that than I can. Okay, so now that you know what you want to be, say it's an LLC, the way you do it is you file documents with the Secretary of State's office. You usually do this in the state in which you live or work, but you could do it somewhere else. I'm not going to get into that now unless somebody wants to ask about it. You'd file articles of organization or articles of incorporation, depending on the type of business you set up. And then you draft operating agreements or bylaws. And this is the governing document for your company. Right. So this is a document that's going to talk about voting rights and economic rights and transfer restrictions and what happens if somebody dies, what happens if somebody wants to sell their interest and all of that stuff. Right. So once you have those things in place, then you get an EIN, which I'll just briefly mention is your employer identification number that you get from the IRS. Once you have those things in place, you form the company with the state, you got your EIN, and you've drafted your operating agreement or for a corporation bylaws and a shareholder agreement. Take all that to the bank and open up your bank account. And there you go. You've got a business and you're all legit. You've got your bank account set up. You've got your business formed and all that stuff. It's a good idea to keep track of filing annual reports on an ongoing basis if your state requires it. Kansas requires it of both LLCs and corporations, but Missouri only requires it of corporations. So that's nice. And then from there, you've got all kinds of things you could do. I'm a lawyer. I could come up with a million things, filing your trademark with the trademark office, protecting your intellectual property, namely your copyrights, using well-drafted contract templates with, clients, employees, contractors, and so on. And then also think about getting insurance. And we can talk about insurance if anybody wants to ask about it. But basically, you do those 3-4 things that I mentioned, and you've got a legit business. So I'll hand it off to Megan, and she can kind of talk through the finance stuff real quick. It looks like we've got the polling back from what kind of business it is. We've got a lot of freelancers in here. I'm a freelancer myself. There's this awesome book here called Company of One. I don't know if I'm holding that the right direction, but anyway, Company of One. It's all about freelancing and you should check it out. Not really about freelancing, but about operating a small business. Anyway, this is really helpful to know. Most of you are freelancers, a lot of you are small businesses, and then a few of you are high growth startups. But this is really helpful for me to know, and probably Megan, so we can direct our questions towards those kinds of businesses. So, all right, Megan, you want to take this?
And thanks so much to everybody for participating. And I'm about to drop another poll here in a couple of minutes. Real quick, before we hop into Megan, I do want to invite all of you, if you already have a business or you have an idea for a business, definitely share it over in the chat. We want to hear about what you're doing. If you have links or ways that we can connect with you. One of the great things about GW is the way that it connects small business owners and entrepreneurs. So let's keep the love going and let's support each other. #shop local. So definitely share that. But Megan, one of my experts. I am so excited to hear from you because I have to tell you, anytime somebody says the word accounting to me, like I shrivel a little inside. Definitely kind of my Everest as a business owner. And so I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, give us a little bit of background, and much like Chris, give us a little bit of, what should we look for with accounting as new business owners?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks so much for moderating. I so enjoy working with Chris Brown. This is awesome to be here. And I love seeing the businesses pop up in the chats, and that's really fun to have. So thanks for sharing, guys. So I started off in Big Four accounting, one of the Big Four across the street, really from where we are now. And I discovered quickly that I really liked helping individual people and small businesses. Chris and I really have that in common. So a lot more interested in those small businesses, you guys with us here today, more so than like the corporate world of accounting where you're kind of behind a computer all the time. I just love, our office helps small businesses. We say 0 to like few million, 5 million in revenue, and it's kind of across industry. And I love nothing more than to get in the room with the new small business owner and learn their passions and their hurdles and help them move forward in their numbers and really anything else they kind of want to talk about. So I'm super excited to be here today. Here's what I'm just going to start with, just kind of a basic business principle that I find to be really true for myself. When I started with a cheap laptop and $300 software, and I was self-employed freelancer, just like everybody, like a lot of people here on the chat today. Now we have a team of 6 as of today, actually, a team of 6, and helping small businesses all over Kansas City. Really passionate about that. So I very much have been walking that entrepreneurial journey the last 6 years. And one thing I found to be really true is that just that like Stephen Covey principle of it's really easy to put off what's important when it's not urgent, especially for those of us that like to get things done and get started and move forward. And I see that all the time. I've filed 10 years of unfiled tax returns for a sophisticated executive who didn't get around to filing 10 years of tax returns. Every time we get a new accounting client, typically it starts off as a mess because it's been neglected for at least a year, and that's fine. We love messes. We'll take them on. But it's not hurting us. It's really hurting you and your business when you kind of have that gnawing at you that something's important, but it's just not right in front of you. So that's just really true with accounting and taxes is sometimes when stuff, like Lauren said, when it's, intimidating and overwhelming, it's just easy to put it off to the next day and the next day. And one thing that I've done to kind of combat that in my own practice is to just put time on the calendar. Maybe I'm not going to tell myself I'm going to get all my accounting done. I'm not going to tell myself I'm going to understand my taxes when I jump into that activity, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to take a step. So I would say that's kind of a general good business principle, but it definitely applies when it comes to taxes and accounting. When you wait a whole year, when you start into freelance work and you wait a year to ask yourself what your tax implications might be, that's a painful tax season, that next tax season. Chris kind of knows as well as I do, just being a freelancer himself, but you're helping yourself by kind of forcing yourself to just look into it and see what your next steps need to be as it relates to taxes and accounting. So that's just an encouragement I have for everybody. And then another thing I want to add to that is it doesn't hurt to look up stuff on the internet, like in preparation with meeting with your professional. I find that people come in pretty educated. They say, well, I think because I'm an LLC, this or that, and it helps us build on that base level knowledge. But another thing people always tell me is, I don't understand taxes. I'm really bad at it, as if they're the only one. There's no such thing as understanding taxes well unless you're doing this all the time. There's thousands and thousands of pages of tax code. It's not intuitive a lot of the time. So don't let your any insecurity stop you from meeting with a professional, learning more. It's you and everybody else. It doesn't matter if you meet with a doctor, an attorney. It doesn't matter. That base level knowledge isn't there because it's a whole world in and of its own. So just don't let the fear keep you from jumping into the game. And I've said this on a Zoom we did a few months ago. If you don't get a tax notice from your city or your state or the IRS, if you don't get tax notice, you're probably not in business. Like, as much as you try to do your due diligence and comply, that's kind of part of running a business and learning where you need to be compliant. So again, I just say, don't let that fear kind of keep you frozen. And then the other thing I will say, so it doesn't hurt to look up information and Google and try to be as prepared as possible as it relates to tax implications for your situation. On the flip side of that, one thing I see that's a common stumbling block is people relying too much on like what their friends and what blogs like Facebook posts say, like, oh, people come in like, oh, I can write off losses on my farm forever, right? Just ridiculous things that they're so convinced of it because someone said it on a Facebook comment. So do research. It's not going to hurt you to do some research and try to be more educated. But really be skeptical when something sounds too good to be true. And a buddy of a buddy said he gets to write off 3 personal cars every year because he has a business, whatever. So that's kind of my basic high level advice, just getting started. So again, thank you so much, Lauren. And I really do look forward to everyone's questions. So yeah, thanks.
I know, and we are coming in hot with the questions. Just a reminder for those of you who have just joined us, if you have a question for our illustrious panelists, please be sure to ask that in the Q&A. It's just a little bit easier for us to manage. We do invite you to chat in the chat, share your business, share your thoughts about what's happening. We definitely want to see what you think, but we want to hear your questions in Q&A. Before we hop right into the first question that we have, I'm going to go ahead and say we asked a question. We put a poll out there. Do you have an LLC or a corporation? Have you started an LLC or corporation yet? And it looks like a majority of you, 61%, said yes. 39% said no. So thank you so much for sharing that. That definitely helps us as we are trying to figure out the best way to answer your questions and the best questions to ask. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy one final poll here. I know you are all so excited, but this one's going to be a little bit for Megan. We're going to help her out, and we're going to ask you, do you use an accounting platform? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to answer that question. And we're going to go right to our audience Q&A because you are already so amazing. And it looks like Chris has been the overachiever and he's been answering questions. Chris, thank you for that. But I'm going to go ahead and I really think that this is a fantastic one. So it's from Imani Mehta, and please excuse me if I did not pronounce that correctly, but I'm going to ask, is there a cost-effective way to get legal help for IP and patents? And I ask that, and I think it's a great question because I cannot tell you how many entrepreneurs come to me and say, do I need an NDA? How do I protect my IP? So let's start there. Chris, what do you got for Imani?
Yeah, so to begin, there's 4 types of IP. I'm not going to go deep into each one, but there's patents, which protect inventions. There's copyrights, which will protect creative works. Trademarks will protect your branding elements, and then trade secrets will protect your confidential information and your trade secrets, right? That's the name. So patents are probably the most complicated in most respects. It's certainly the most expensive to register. You can easily spend 10 or 20 grand to register a patent. It can easily take several years or more to do it. It's very complicated. And if you're going to get a patent, I highly recommend you talk to a patent specific lawyer. I do a lot of intellectual property work and I know a lot about patents, but I don't do patent work. I don't have a science or engineering background. To get right to the meat of the question, is there a cost-effective way of doing it? There's not very many cost-effective ways of doing it. And the ones that are the most cost-effective are going to be the slowest and least efficient. But that's just the way it is, right? The ways I would recommend you go about that are to join like an accelerator or something like the eScholars program at UMKC is awesome because they will hook you up with free mentors at law firms around town that can give you free advice and sometimes free legal services with respect to filing your patent. There might be some patent legal clinics around the country. I'm not aware of any, but there might be. I've just never searched for it before, where you can get low cost or free patent help. But just keep in mind, if it's law students doing it, it's going to be a slow process, like slower than normal. So patents are just, unfortunately, one of the more complicated ones. If you're looking to protect copyrights and trademarks, those are much more they're much faster and less expensive and things that I work on all the time. Not overly cheap necessarily, but still a lot less expensive than patents.
So I was going to pop in. Thank you so much for that, Chris. I was going to pop in really quickly. And of course, I want to say first and foremost, if you have legal questions, definitely reach out to Pixel Law. But if you are a minority business owner, Hush Blackwell actually has a program called Communities for Change where they offer pro bono legal assistance to just starting small business owners and entrepreneurs. So that's something that you might want to look into if that applies to you. So looks like most folks have come in with their response on do you use an accounting platform? I'm just going to share out those results really quickly. But it looks like most of you do not. 61% no. And interestingly enough, that was the same percentage that said yes for the last question. Interesting. I would be curious, share in the chat, like, are you just doing a whole lot of spreadsheets? Is that what's happening here if you're not using a platform? Megan, how often do you meet entrepreneurs and small business owners who are just living and dying by Excel or Google Sheets?
Yeah. I'd say maybe 15% of our clients have an Excel spreadsheet for tracking income and expenses as opposed to accounting software. And I'll just throw it out there that it's getting very inexpensive to use accounting software, and it's getting very lay user friendly to do so too. So don't let it be one of those things that you don't even look into, because sometimes it's free. They have apps that are free that will track your income and expenses, and next thing you know, you have profit and loss. So definitely keep your eyes open. They target them for freelancers and self-employed folks. So not bad to use Excel, but they're definitely, a lot of times you end up making that change too late, and you kind of wish you were producing financials from software more sooner than you thought you wanted to be. So yeah.
Now, if you don't mind my asking, Megan, what type of accounting platform do you use?
I'll be honest, the most dominating accounting software in the market right now is QuickBooks Online. They really do kind of own the market for small businesses. And so that's mostly what we're using with our clients. It's really versatile. We can be in that as needed. They include a mileage tracker with your QuickBooks Online app. It's very comprehensive, automatic bank feeds to categorize transactions. So I won't commend their payroll, honestly, but their accounting is really dominating the market. And I expect it to do so for, say, a few years before someone really gets competitive in terms of what you get for what you pay. So QuickBooks Online tends to be most common, but if you find something that works for you, keep using it for sure.
So I'm going to put a shameless plug in there for Xero, because it is so easy to use. And I think it's like $10 a month for an enterprise system.
Yeah.
Super easy, super cheap. Now, we don't have like complicated accounting or anything like that. So I will add a secondary plug for Xero. And they are not paying me to say that.
Xero and Wave are both great. I know for a while their FreshBooks was good. So yeah, those are both great. If you have those, we can work with you on those just as easily as anything else. So.
Okay. Well, cool. So I'm going to go right back into the Q&A, because man, y'all have some questions. So we went ahead and we recommended some accounting platforms. I'm going to go back. I want to bug Chris a little bit. So Chris, this might be for you, and it might actually be a little bit for Megan as well, but SJG asks, is there a problem with adding my spouse to the banking account for my LLC if he is not included in the LLC? I actually don't know the answer to this question. I'm assuming one of you does.
Let me tackle the legal side, but I bet Megan has thoughts too. But on the legal side, it's often easier to, like, if you have a husband, wife, wife, whatever situation, it's easiest to set up the business with just one owner. I mean, you can do it with both owners if you want to, but sometimes it's easier just to do one owner. But you can always make the spouse a signatory. You can designate them as a manager of the LLC, which is a legal term, and then they can take action for the LLC, add them to the bank signature card so they can transact business with the bank. So it's totally possible. You just want to talk to a lawyer about the best way to do it for your situation. But I'll let Megan chime in because she might have other thoughts.
Have anything to add to that. There's really no significant tax implication, but yeah, I would have said something similar. But it's really, to me, it's more of a legal and liability question. Are you being consistent with how you set up your LLC and doing that? But I think Chris has answered that adequately.
Can I ask a related question here for Megan?
Yeah.
So I get a lot of husband and wife people that come to me and they say, we want to create an LLC. And I often tell them, just make one of you the owner, but both of you can manage it. If they both set up the company as a partnership, do they have to file a partnership tax return, even if they're husband and wife?
Yes.
Okay,
And
that's
I generally encourage the same thing Chris does. It's a lot simpler, especially when you're starting out, to do sole owner, and the other one can work in the business, can operate the business with you. So yeah, because yes, you are looking at a partnership return, which really jumps in sophistication from a single owner tax return, and a lot of times is unnecessary. So yeah, you do have to file a partnership return if it's two spouses technically owning the business.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both so much for sharing. And that was interesting. I was like, I don't really know who to ask this question of because it touches on both. So I'm going to go ahead and ask, and just a quick reminder, if you have a question, please submit it through Q&A. Chat is for us to just have fun conversation as we're talking. But I'm going to go ahead and ask one right here. Leaving a commissioned job to start my own firm, is there a specific type of attorney I should hire to help collect the commissions I have earned? My past employer is giving me excuses instead of money. Is there anything I can do on my own? And I'm going to assume that one's for you, Chris.
Yeah. If you need to talk to an attorney, I would definitely talk to a litigation attorney and probably an employment law litigation attorney. People don't realize this, I don't think. A lot of attorneys specialize, right? So I do a ton of work on transactional things, contracts, trademarks, all that stuff. I don't do litigation, right? So if you come to me and say, I got a DUI, I'll say, I can't help you. I mean, I might know more than you know, but I don't know much about that kind of stuff. So in this case, talk to an employment litigation attorney. There's probably various employment laws that can protect you, and the employer might be violating those employment laws. Another tactic is just to have a lawyer send a demand letter for you, right? It depends on how much they owe you. If they only owe you $1,000, it might be hard to hire a lawyer. It may not make sense. They owe you 20 grand. Yeah, it's probably worth $500 to have a lawyer send the demand letter. But in either
I feel
event,
like that would be a good
litigation lawyer.
ROI. Throw $500 at it and receive back 20.
But keep in mind, you may not get it. One of the
Yeah.
things that always surprises me, a client will come to me and tell me all about their problem, and then I talk to the other side's attorney, and their view is on everything is completely opposite, and they throw all this other stuff at me that my client did wrong. And so there's no guarantee that $500 will actually result in a $20,000 payout.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well, and I think
litigator.
the secret hidden point that you're making is always be explicitly honest with your attorney. They can't, and your accountant, they cannot help you unless you are honest with them. Right, friends? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Just want to throw that out there. Well, so great. And we just a really quick follow-up, because this is a related question. What type of attorney is best for reviewing contracts, Chris?
A contract attorney. I mean, right.
I have to admit, I didn't actually know that was an explicitly stated type of attorney. I figured it would have been folded into something else.
The same thing. Don't go to your uncle, the DUI lawyer, to review your business contract. Right. I mean, he's just not going to be good at it. Right. And I'm not going to be good at your DUI, for example. But what I am good at is reviewing contracts of all kinds, especially the business contracts, lease agreements, employment agreements, contractor agreements, client agreements. So yeah, somebody like me or a transactional attorney at a firm somewhere is who you'd want to go talk to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So the next question, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask Megan. And Abby, hi, Abby. Abby and I actually just had coffee, and then I had to run home so that we could do this. But Abby Carter asks, do you have to have a business bank account if you are a freelancer? Is it legal to use your personal bank account if you do not have an LLC yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Chris and I would both answer this, could both answer this, and it's a really tax question, but you, in the eyes of the IRS and the taxing agencies, when you operate as a sole proprietor and you don't have an LLC and you don't have a corporation, you are your business. There's no distinguishing you from the business you're operating. So it's not only is it okay, it's the appropriate course of action is to use a personal bank account if it's, business. They used to, and Chris, you can comment on this if you want to. They used to say, I used to hear oh, you can just use a personal account with a DBA, like a doing business as, and it can be on your social, your own personal account. I have found most business or most banks are very clear cut. It's either a personal checking or it's a business. And if it's a business one, they want some kind of articles and an EIN associated. So I kind of have seen this bright line of if it's a personal account, it's got your personal name on it, and it's totally normal and appropriate to be operating that way if you're a sole proprietor, because again, the IRS doesn't distinguish between your business entity and you. You're one entity as far as they are concerned until you make a different election. And do you mind, Lauren, I might take this opportunity to say something very important. It's a question I get all the time. There is no tax implication for becoming an LLC. There's no IRS implication. An LLC is called a disregarded entity in the eyes of the IRS. It is a state-specific legal structure. It's not a tax thing. So let's say last year you're operating as a sole proprietor, you're walking dogs, and you have a Schedule C is what it's called in your personal tax return. You and your business are one. The IRS sees you as one entity. If you make an LLC, if you become an LLC this year, nothing changed for tax purposes, unless you sit down with a tax professional and decide, I'm so big that I want to go ahead and make an S Corp election or something of that nature. Nothing changes when you become an LLC. So just remember that an LLC is a state designation. The IRS doesn't recognize it. As far as it's concerned, your business is running along as usual. So Chris, I welcome your comments on that too.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything she said. I'll just make one last comment. Do not commingle your funds. So when you set up a business account, whether it's like your own personal account you use for business, or you have an LLC and you set up an LLC bank account, don't commingle the money, keep them separate. And this is especially true, I think, for people that are operating as a freelancer without an LLC, primarily for just organization purposes. But anyway, that limited liability I talked about earlier, can be breached. A court can break through that limited liability and come after your personal assets if certain things happen. And one of those certain things is if you commingle your personal funds and your business funds.
Yeah, so that's another thing that's specific there. You just kind of, as a business owner, you kind of have to get it in your head that there is one set of principles to operate on for LLC and protecting yourself from liability, and another set of principles for taxes. And they're not the same. It's not a direct equivalent. So the IRS might not care that you opened an LLC bank account and you ran personal and business, you commingled. If you've got proof and good records of your income and your business expenses, that's what the IRS cares about. Commingling is where you start to risk that protection that LLC is providing you in terms of liability. So you want to be kind of really cognizant and aware of both the IRS rules versus an LLC and how that's protecting you in your liability.
For sure. And so I'm going to actually add like a little secret, super ninja benefit of opening up a separate business bank account. It lends you a little bit more credibility if you have certain kinds of businesses. I can't tell you how many times before Innovator was actually a thing where I would be like, yeah, just write the check out to Lauren Conaway. And people would just kind of, really? That feels squicky. And I totally got it. So I prioritized opening up a business bank account. So definitely lends you a little bit of credibility, which I know has nothing to do with the legality or the, fiduciary responsibility aspect, but it definitely made my life a little easier. So we have more questions coming in, and definite folks, keep them coming. We're going to keep going right up until I think 10:45, 11-ish, depending on how things go. So keep your questions coming. Make sure to pump them through the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and ask one from Stephanie Fry, because I think that this is actually a really fantastic question for both of you. Here it comes. My spouse and I want to start a delivery business. We plan to buy a cargo van or box truck and attempt to get a contract with Amazon, FedEx, etc. After purchasing the truck van, what would our next step be to get our business started? And I imagine the two of you will have different responses, but they will be highly interrelated. So let's hear it. Chris, why don't we go with you first?
Yeah, first thing I would do is not even necessarily legal, but more of a business thing. Make sure you can get the contract from one of those vendors before you actually close on buying the truck, because I don't know much about how they sign those contracts. Basically, I would do everything that I said at the beginning of this call, right? I would set up your LLC. Most likely an LLC is probably what you would want there. Set up the LLC, get good insurance on the van and the operations of the van, draft a good operating agreement, especially if the two of you are going to own the business as co-owners. If it's just going to be one of you, then kind of like we were talking about earlier, one of you can be the owner and the other spouse could just be an employee or a contractor or whatever. Draft the operating agreement. Get your bank account, keep everything totally separate. I mean, that's a relatively simple business concept. And then I would probably recommend having a lawyer review the contract that FedEx or whoever gives you. I would assume that contract is going to be very one-sided in favor of the other party. So it's going to be largely reviewing the contract to see what risks you're taking on. But that's my quick advice. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, so I would probably designate between the two of you who's going to kind of take more responsibility of the admin and accounting side. A lot of times with couples, there's a more automatic nerd in the group. So I would designate the person that just naturally enjoys that, but make a decision as to how you are going to track income and expenses. It's in its most basic form. Accounting is not more than tracking your income, tracking your expenses. So even if you don't decide to spring for an accounting software, just be on top of it. Be on top of every little receipt that you have for your expenses, because in these first couple of years, when maybe you're going to have a loss, or maybe you're going to have significant expenses relative to income, you don't want to lose out on any of those deductions. So make a decision, whether we're going to put it in an Excel spreadsheet, whether we're going to put it in QuickBooks, sign up, make a decision about how you're going to track income and expenses. Ultimately, I would call this like a 0 to 10 business. You know, if once you take off, you're going to have significant revenue. Even if you don't have a ton of net income, once you get started, your revenue numbers have there's the potential to really skyrocket, I'd say, just because those are big dollar amounts when you're talking about contracts with Amazon and delivering. So know that as you grow a business, as you start off as a freelancer, I'd like contractors are a perfect example. If you are successful, your numbers are going to be relatively large because you don't remodel a house for less than whatever, $100,000, you know, whatever that number is. So what I would say is there is not, in the tax world, there's not all of these options. There's really a couple succinct options for taxation. You start off as a Schedule C, like I said before. Personal tax return includes your business numbers, and it's all one tax return. Once you get to a point that your business is doing such significant revenue that you can start to pull out a salary that's a legitimate industry salary for the owner, then you look at making what's called an S Corp election for tax purposes. I'd say we're half and half. Half our small business clients are Schedule C, probably the other half are S Corp filers. So just know that's something to be, you don't have to have that all figured out right now, but have that in your back of your mind that as you start to get contracts and have revenue, you want to look at, is it going to be the year that I need to make an S Corp election? Because ultimately that saves you in taxes. That's all I would need to tell you to not overwhelm you right now, but just be thinking about that. As you start to gain contracts and have more revenue, do I need to look at making an S or C Corp election and not just be a Schedule C on my personal tax return? Those are the two things I would say to keep in mind as you get started.
Excellent. Well, Chris, and Megan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A that I actually think would be better served being answered by some of our friends in the audience. Clearly, we have some pretty awesome business owners here with a lot of thoughts and a lot of insights. So number one, I'm going to challenge each and every one of you. If you have a bank in Kansas City that you recommend for business banking, share it in the chat. Share what you like about them. You know, for instance, I use Community America and I love them. They have a deep community commitment and they have a lot of cool online business tools, which is really important for me because I hate physically going to the bank. But if you have some other answers, most definitely share them. Another one, somebody asked if you do you have business insurance providers that you recommend? So if you have a business insurance provider that you love, share it in the chat. We would love to hear about it. And then I'm gonna tap Chris for the second part of that question, which is so Janine, as a food truck owner, doesn't really know what she needs to cover. And Chris, I know you're not an insurance guy, and Megan, you might have some thoughts on this as well. Are there some base things that business owners should definitely have covered when they look for insurance? And you can tell me to piss off and that, you know, I'm not an insurance person. That's totally fine too.
I would say quickly, I just commented, you might want to look into Brush Creek Partners or True Insurance. Those are two decent options for getting insurance in Kansas City. You'd probably start out with a general liability policy, which protects you against general liability, a light bulb falling on grandma's head or whatever, right? But from there's a million different options, and talking to a broker is your best bet. But you would want to look at things like cyber liability if you've got a lot of data stuff going on, workers' comp if you have employees and meet the requirements for the state, auto insurance if you have automobiles involved in your business like delivery. A big one would be like an E&O, D&O, or a professional liability policy. They're all kind of similar, but I'm sure there's differences. And those are going to protect you against professional negligence. So I carry malpractice insurance. So if I give bad legal advice, my malpractice carrier would hopefully pick that up. The same idea for like marketing professionals, copywriters, web designers, they would probably have some kind of a professional liability or a media policy or something like that. But anyway, the best thing to do is talk to a business, talk to a insurance broker who can assess your risks and look at different carriers to get you the best rate.
Yeah, that's what I would say too, I look for a broker who will shop for you and give you pretty independent advice. And then general liability is a good one for kind of all businesses to have, but then really look at your industry. Our contractors really need to have work comp and general liability. And I really need to have errors and omissions as a professional services provider. So it can be pretty industry specific, and then know that it's just not going to hurt you to shop. So even if you feel like, oh, I don't know that I have the capacity to afford business insurance, it's relative to your numbers. So it's going to be specific to your situation, the cost of it is, and it doesn't hurt to shop it and see. I know I've used Hartford recently and I really like Hartford, but they'll make it pretty user friendly for you if you decide to opt for it in terms of how you pay and how you review your policy and stuff. So.
And one more thought there, if you're working with bigger clients, there's a very good chance that their contracts require you to carry certain kinds of insurance policies. Mm-hmm. So always review those contracts and see what they require. And if you don't carry whatever they say, then edit the agreement. Don't sign a contract that says you have $1 million cyber liability policy if you don't actually have a cyber liability policy, right? And often you can talk to the client and be like, look, I don't have any of your data. I don't need cyber liability. And maybe they'll take it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. I know that insurance isn't probably your super areas of expertise, but you've been around, you know how all of this works. You've been doing this for a long time. So thank you so much for sharing that. So Chris, I want to ask you, I've been doing a lot of, the Q&A from the comments, but I have a very selfish reason for asking this next question of you. I cannot tell you how many business owners I talk to on a day-to-day basis, and they want to enter into some kind of partnership with my organization, and they do not offer a partnership agreement or a contract. And it scares me. I am scared for all of you who do this, who do not want to put things in writing to protect yourselves when you look to, I don't know, partner with people or secure vendors or whatever it is that you're doing. Now, Chris, please tell me, and you can totally tell me, I won't be offended. Am I being an alarmist? Do you need to have a contract in place?
No, you don't have to. Oral contracts are absolutely.
You're going to break my heart.
Well, no, but hear me out here. So oral contracts are absolutely enforceable. The problem is proving what the terms of the contract are, right? Right. So a written agreement, or at least an email exchange, is always better than an oral agreement. But keep in mind, the contract doesn't have to be 100 pages necessarily. I strongly recommend written agreements for almost all deals, right? If you're going to sell me your bike for $100, you probably don't need a written agreement for that, right? But any kind of business deal, just draft up some agreement, even if it's just something that you're writing on your own. So Lauren could say, "Here's what I'm doing," and then the other party says, "Well, here's what I'm doing," and then you sign it. Hey, that's better than nothing.
Yep.
Right.
I just actually executed a partnership agreement like that, but I can't tell you how many people come to me and they're just like, "Oh, we had coffee. It's totally fine." And I'm like, "No, you protect yourself, please. Like, yeah. I want you to protect yourself."
Well, and what I would say is avoid the word partnership, because partnership has a legal meaning and it means that you're creating a business between the two of you, right?
Sure.
So even if you call it a partnership agreement, you probably want to say in the agreement, we're not creating a partnership, which sounds counterintuitive.
Okay.
But, joint venture cross.
I think we definitely have vendor contracts and we have sponsorship agreements and things like that. So we differentiate when it comes time to sign on the dotted line. Gotcha. Okay. I just wanted to ask you that for my own peace of mind, because sometimes I feel like I'm probably being a little too nervous. But I don't know.
Contracts are awesome. They help you to avoid disputes later. If you get into a dispute, they help you to resolve the dispute. There's a million reasons to use contracts. Of course, I'm going to say that I'm a contract lawyer, but
I was going to say, speaking of that, Chris, you have some pretty neat resources at your command.
I do. So I sell contract templates through my website. If you go to pixellaw.com, you can see there's at the top, it says contract shop. It'll take you to Gumroad, where I sell template client agreements, employment agreements, NDAs, and other things. And then I've also got contractcanvas.com, which is an online contract platform for freelancers, which you can check out. But at some point you have to hire a lawyer or buy a template or something. At some point you have to invest money in this. It's just a cost of doing business. And a good lawyer can actually save you a lot of money and a lot of headaches. So
I hate to still take over it all, but there's a couple good questions in the Q&A that I'm hoping we get to. And
I wanted to ask that very selfishly. So thank you so much for indulging me. It happens more often than you might think. Well, let's go ahead. Megan, you have raised an interesting point. Let's go ahead. Is there one in particular you'd like to answer?
Yeah, not even answer, really throw it to Chris. One I'm hoping to answer, but I thought I'd throw this first one to Chris and recognize the name, so I'm just looking out for her. But can you have two different businesses under the same LLC, like a holding company? Throwing that at Chris.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll try to keep this one short. Yes. I mean, you can have Chris Brown Holdings Inc. or Chris Brown Holdings LLC and then have a bunch of DBAs underneath it. Kansas doesn't have a DBA database, which is weird, but Missouri does. So I do holding companies like that for people all the time. The thing is, just make sure whoever you're contracting with knows the legal name of the business entity. But yes, short answer is yes.
And then if it's okay, Lauren, can I just answer it and then I'll take my hands off Q&A?
I would love for you to answer whichever questions you would like to answer, my friends.
This is just such a good one for startups, man. I'm buying equipment this year, but not making money until next year. Can I wait until next year to deduct the costs? And I just want to throw this out there that not only can you wait, you probably have to wait. So it depends on the numbers, but when you're a startup and you're pre-operational, the IRS actually doesn't just let you start taking like massive deductions and losses. They want you to be in business before you're really deducting ongoing expenses. So there's some caveats there. You get a write-off like the first $5,000 in startup costs in the initial year, but that's only if you're not spending big money. Once you hit like 50,000 in startup costs, they say, nope, you're not writing anything off until you are operational. And a lot of times for the IRS, a really good indication of operational is having some revenue. So yeah, not only can you probably have to wait until you've kind of got those doors open, seeking contracts, getting some money in. But yeah, so that's a really great question.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Oftentimes a client will come to me, especially at this time of year, and say, I want to create a company, but I don't want to have to do taxes this year. And so sometimes I'll say, well, you're going to pay me. You might buy a domain, you might sign up for Xero or QuickBooks. So go ahead and do those things and you just reimburse yourself and write it off in next year's tax return. And I always tell them there's a limit. I thought it was 2,500, but maybe it's $5,000. Is that all true, or am I screwing up my clients there?
Yeah, I would say so. It's some of those like you kind of have to look at it big picture and say how big a deal is it. So just to wait and take it the next year, if you're talking about a couple $1,000s, I would argue the IRS really doesn't care and they're not really worried about that year-end cutoff. I would argue that. I've done, I mean, a few $100 to buy this laptop and I really didn't start till January, you know, whatever. But yeah, so that's just something to be mindful of. Is it's more just the tax treatment of it. So like if depending on how much you spend, you might be amortizing those costs instead of just writing them off all at once. And that's that $5,000 limit. But again, I would say don't feel overwhelmed that you don't have this memorized. You probably never will. But just have the concepts, know the concepts. If I start up a business, sometimes I'm having conversations with clients about let's get you operational by 12/31 so we can take this loss. You know, that's where tax planning and strategy comes into effect.
Fantastic. Well, so we've got a couple of more audience answered questions that I want to get to. We do need to be wrapping up here though. So I'm going to ask one that's pseudo related to the previously asked question. I've purchased equipment for my business. What are the rules as to when the equipment is placed in service for tax purposes? Does it have to be in the year it was purchased?
So no, placed in service can be like a lot of times the IRS says until you've done all of your setup and maintenance on it to place it in service, you're not depreciating it yet. So placed in service really is placed in service, really using it in the business is the technical rule there.
Gotcha. Okay, and before we answer this last question, if anybody in the audience has any final questions that they would like to ask, now is the time. Remember, you are talking to experts who normally charge money, honey, for their services. So this is the perfect time for you to pick the brains of some truly brilliant people that I am very, very privileged and proud to call compatriots and friends. So final question that we have in the Q&A at the moment. How do I get Social Security credit while working with my spouse in sole proprietorship? Yeah, so
that really does come into wages. So even if, and hang on to this, let's say you and your spouse are just that Schedule C sole proprietor, you have not made any other elections. The spouse that owns that business 100% is going to get Social Security credit for whatever they net on that Schedule C on that tax return. So the spouse that owns owns the business 100% will get their Social Security credit on the profit that you make in the business. This other spouse that works, if you're going to do 100% owner, which is much simpler for tax purposes, it is okay for that spouse to make a W-2 wage. And Chris and I both, we love Gusto. That's our #1 payroll provider for sure. So it is okay to get set up, the other spouse that's a non-owner, to get set up on wages and to be paid. And that's how you will pay in payroll tax and you will get your Social Security credit. So if you want to operate at that simplest level where your Schedule C on a personal tax return, one owns the business, Social Security credit comes from the profit, and the other spouse can have W-2 wages, and that's how you build up Social Security credit. So great question.
Awesome. All right. So we are in the home stretch, friends, and we have gone over time. I like to think that the information shared was so valuable that GEW will forgive us. But any final thoughts? And I'm going to go to Chris and Megan, then after that, if there's one takeaway that you wish folks could leave with, and you wish that everybody knew, what would you like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I'd say don't ignore this stuff. It's so easy to ignore it because it's not fun for most people. Talk to a lawyer, talk to an accountant up front. It's shockingly not that expensive to meet with, both up front, even if it's just like a 1-hour planning meeting, right? You don't have to spend $10,000. Just talk to somebody like myself or like Megan. There's other people in the community just like us that, will do an initial meeting and help you kind of get things going. Just don't ignore it, tackle it up front, and then it'll make your life a lot easier when you move forward.
Yes.
Megan, what you got?
I just would reiterate that. I think that's kind of how I started out in just the intro, and I couldn't agree more. It's just put the time on your calendar. Just say, next Monday from 8 to 9, I'm going to research my tax implications and look for a professional to help one time or whatever. Just put some time on your calendar and honor it, and you will thank yourself, and you'll have a sense of dignity as a business owner that you're pushing through and doing those things that are hard and overwhelming, but you're getting them done. So just put the time on your calendar to look into these important aspects of running your business.
That is such good advice from both of you. And thank you both so much for sharing so willingly of your time and your expertise. It takes a big heart to be as knowledgeable as you are and as kind as you are. And we are extraordinarily grateful. Do you want to ask really quickly? This is my last question, I promise. But Chris, Megan, where can we find you?
I'm at pixellaw.com, and you're all more than welcome to email me at chris@pixellaw.com, and I'll put that in the chat box again right now.
Yeah. Same, HoveeCPA.com, and I'll put an email as well. Welcome to email. We really try to do have a holistic accounting and tax approach for people at a price point that is affordable for a small business owner. So it's really our mission. We're super passionate about it. I am so excited for all of you and the businesses that you run. Nothing gets us more excited than just your small business endeavor and you going for it. So really kudos to everybody on the chat for whatever your mission and your passion is.
And Lauren, what about you? How do we get a hold of you?
Well, so if you are, first of all, if you want to just, chat or have coffee, it's Lauren@innovateherkc.com. If you are a woman leader or someone from a marginalized gender community and you'd like to join Innovate Her KC, it is free. We have over 4,700 members. It is fun. You can do so at the link that I just shared in the chat, and we would certainly love to have you. Chris, Megan, it has been an honor. I love doing this, and I love doing it with people who are so committed to community and helping, just like you. To our dear audience, thank you for being in it to win it with us, asking great questions, staying engaged the whole time. It has been truly a pleasure learning about you and your businesses. Don't forget to shop local, support each other, connect with each other outside of this session, and definitely go to gewkc.org to fill out the rest of your GEW agenda, including Chris's event on what was it? Trademarks and intellectual property on Thursday. Intellectual property, and then join us on Friday for Girls Just Want to Have Funding. We will catch you on the flip side. Thanks so much, friends.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Lauren.